Hi, buddy. Jeff here. I was already doing a couple of videos a little bit earlier on the way home. I got off the train. I was in the car, sitting in the parking lot. It's kind of cold outside, and we were at the zero, actually just under 0 degrees centigrade. And so I kind of started the car, and I decided to do a couple of videos. And one of the things I want to get to is while talking about translation, and I just did a thing about translation speed and talked about quality and all that. And one of the things I was kind of a rabbit trail. I was going to create in a rabbit trail, and I decided to make a separate video. Is the need for accent marks or not in content? It's a big debate, especially in French. Okay, because the French are really believe that you need to put their accent marks. And and I've been living here for 30 years, and I married a French woman. Now, but I was a professor for French for many years, and got into translation. I've been doing different translation speech technologies, which include having accent marks. Um, but in my professional career, um, and actually, it's not just in even professional; it's in associations, nonprofit associations, emails, uh, uh, reports, or even doing administrative work that you have to do for like taxes or whatever. You need to put accent marks in French, which you don't have in English. And writing for a lot of different purposes, like dating, dating platform stuff. You get all kinds of places, and music, writing things about music or and explaining things. I take a I take bass classes and we write down things, and he writes with the accent marks, right? And I think about even writing letters. And with my kids, the kids are writing about their doing their exams stuff. They're writing, and my kids, we do it in French, so they're writing with accent marks. But the funny thing was, I'm going to come back to is when you do not need accent marks, and one of the things I'm going to point to is one of those tests that you have to see if you can actually fill the words fill in the words of just seeing a paragraph, and it's all the joke about, and it can be done multilingually. If you have a sequence, a paragraph, and all the words, what you do is you take only the first and the last letter of each word and have them correctly placed. You can jumble up all the characters in the middle of each of those words, and you can actually read the paragraph with the jumbled up characters only in the middle, but not at the end. You can still read the content. Your mind is able to actually replace it and fill in the gaps cognitively by reading the text. And this has been done in different languages. But I'm going to go back and talk about why I don't use. I've in emails for the past 3 decades. People, the French, are really convinced that you have to have the accent marks, and I said no, you don't. Uh, Now I do in official reports, and in documents that I publish. But when I'm writing emails, I stopped using accent marks at least 20 years ago. Um, Mainly because the keyboards, I have to switch the keyboard and use the French keyboard or not with accent marks or not. It's kind of a pain to go back and use and type in, use the virtual keyboard to get the accent mark, especially on a computer. Or actually, I did my entire master's thesis with an American keyboard in a word processor. I didn't have a switch to the logical keyboard, and I had to actually type in each of the accent marks individually with a Control Alt sequence. So it's Control Alt 130, 130 with the numeric the keyboard on the numeric keyboard to be able to get the accent mark, the accent aigu with the e, right, and then 137 for accent mark grave on the. I typed it a whole master's thesis with this in French, and it was like a lot of work. And so during that whole process of doing my master's and doctoral work with these keyboards that had to be typing in the letters and inserting them individually and stuff, and I said, maybe I don't need to do this. And so I did a. The funny thing is, I did a poem. I don't know if it was a poem. I wrote a story in which I took words in French that exist. You can write them with or with accent marks, and they tend to be a masculine and feminine, or let's say marked and unmarked formats or forms. And so if you have an accent mark or don't, you can have if you can have an accent mark, it might be le or la. It could be a form, and the other form will not have the accent mark or have it. So you can have these polarity forms, like le forêt and la forêt. La forêt has an accent mark, and le does not, and they mean two different things. There are lots of words like this in French. And so I decided back in 1993, 1994, to write a text, a story. It's a short story, really, really short. I think it's 10 lines. I need to find this thing on a computer somewhere in a disk. The diskette. There's 3.5 diskettes, right? 3-inch diskettes. Where I take all of these words that are with accent marks or not, these double words, they're all homonyms except with the accent mark or not, right? And I wrote a story that I could use them, and at each point in the story I used these pairs of words, but I took out the accent mark on purpose. So you don't know which one it is. You don't know which word it is. And I removed it, I made it so that you could, when I was writing, so you couldn't get if it was a la or la. So I'd say en forêt, okay? Rather than, and I would do say in forest or in, and it's not always a forest. It can be, and so what it is, I try to make it really ambiguous. This text that was completely ambiguous, and at each point in time of where you're getting to each point in the story of each sentence, once or twice in the sentence, you get this split. You can read it two different ways. And the funny thing about the story is that as you're reading through this 10 sentences, that all the sentences go together, right? It's a story. Get to a point, split. Get a point, split, and you can understand both splits at each point in time. It was kind of a great feat to make it to work. And my father-in-law, rest in peace, Jean-Claude, of my father-in-law of my ex-wife, he read the thing, and he would write reports for the Ministry of Finance. He would read and write a lot of reports and correct them, and he corrected my doctoral thesis and in French. And he read this story and he says, "This is great," because it proved that we don't need accent marks in French. It actually proved you don't need them. You can actually go through and read the thing and understand it, because the context. I especially wrote this story, making it so the context was ambiguous on purpose, so that you get two different approaches. There are ambiguous approaches, understandings of each word at each point. But most of the time, you're not making it ambiguous. You're trying to be very specific and saying it's the la or the la or something in before it. You're trying to make it so it's very clear. And so that makes it, so you don't worry about whether or not you know by the context if it should have an accent or not. And so what I've done over the past 25 years is I don't write accent marks in my emails. And sometimes not in my text messages either, in general. Unless I really feel that the person really needs it. But I tend to not to do it. And you know what? It doesn't bother anybody. It does not bother anybody professionally or anything for 30 years. And what I do is when I do write with the accent marks, they say, "Oh, wow, you know how to write all the accent marks." I said, "Of course I do. It's not that I don't know where they are. It's just I choose to not do it because it's a waste of my time. Because I know that people understand, even without accent marks, the French people." And this is a huge debate, but I challenge anybody to prove to me that they can't read my text without understanding in context if I remove the accent marks. so I just don't bother with it. Now, there are times when I do it, and when I want to really, when I want to make an impression on someone, a good impression, I'll do it. But if I don't care about it, if they already know me and they know that I know how to pronounce and I know how to write, it doesn't really matter anymore. I don't care. It just live with it. So and that means that I can get things done faster. It's a productivity factor, and it actually slows me down. I mean, if I have to switch the keyboard or actually on a phone because I use an English because I write so much in English. I think the factor is I read and write a lot in English, or write a lot of English for my job, where I work in France because I'm doing international jobs. I've got it set to English, and if I have to switch the keyboard to French to type in French on the keyboard, it's just kind of a pain in the rear. It's really a pain. So I just choose not to do it because I'm writing way less in French than I used to. But when I do write it, I don't use the accent marks. Or I choose to put them. But then I force and I actually click on the thing, make the E with the accent mark or something, and it takes more time, and it just slows down the productivity. But it depends on what is the benefit of you putting the accent marks or not. If it's going to impress the person, and I really believe that's important, then I'll put the accent marks in, and I'll do them everywhere. If it's not going to impress the person, then actually you have to deal with sometimes the autocorrectors and sometimes I'll take the accent mark out, whether it's forced it to put it in because the autocorrector, I'll take it out. If it does it by purpose, because the rest of the story or rest of the message has no accent marks, or didn't get it, so I'm actually removing them. So, but it's still understandable, and no one that says you didn't do the accent marks. Never get that, but I do get the. So I think this is something where this is I'm just telling a story of an example where people say for quality wise you have to have it. You don't. I release some purpose. It's purpose driven. If my purpose is just to get some content out and for people to understand it, for an email, informal context, not really matter. It won't matter. If I'm writing like a formal document stuff, then I'll put it in. So whatever formality it needs to be. So something to think about, which is going to cause a lot of ripples for people that are into defending the French language. And that's okay. I'm a big kid. I'm not a young kid, so and I can defend why I do it in certain contexts. Purpose-driven content creation and translation. Whatever it's going to do, it's going to get the thing done. So Jeff out. Thanks for listening.